Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I want to frame a little bit before I begin speaking my content this morning. Every time we come together for a bereavement circle at Adat Shalom, I always start by saying one of the core rules is that you are exactly where you need to be. And what I mean by that is sometimes we find ourselves physically in a place where half of us doesn't want to be there. Meaning you're like at the grief circle, but you're wondering if you came to the right place. And I like in that space to always try to say, you are exactly where you need to be. And this group assembled is exactly who needs to be here. And I actually believe that about Shul as well. We've gotten so used to our mental world being projected potentially as far as light can travel. And in a way, I want to really speak this morning just to the people in this room. Okay, there's a live stream going. I know that. But I am going to put it aside. And I am going to pretend that we're having a private conversation, just the 100 or so of us. Why does that feel important to me? Well, I've heard it said that the Torah can serve many purposes. And one of them is that the Torah can be a bit of a goad, meaning the Torah can bring things up that are difficult and that we don't always want to deal with. Chayei Sarah is one of those parshiot. When I was in progressive Jewish circles in my 20s, Chayei Sarah was always the parsha that would be used to talk about violence in the West Bank. Because when we talk about the purchasing of the cave of Machpelah, it flips us into the memory of a horrific incident that happened when Baruch Goldstein gunned down Muslims at prayer in the cave of Machpelah. That is a true story of a horrible thing that happened. And for me, for years, Parshat Chayei Sarah was the moment when you would kind of wrestle with, like, do I want to make everyone uncomfortable? So I was thinking about that, and then I heard a teaching this week that focused on a slightly different moment, also in the very beginning of this parsha, and I actually think it's even more important and instructive for our time. As I mentioned in the Torah intro today, Avraham describes himself as a ger v'toshav, as a resident and an alien. Actually, in the reverse, as an alien and as a resident. And Rabbi Soloveitchik, a very important American rabbi of the 20th century, said in 1979 that Abraham's definition of his dual status describes with profound accuracy the historical position of the Jew who resides in predominantly non-Jewish society. Now, why did this Torah speak to me so much in this moment? I would say I'm a 40-year-old. I was born in 1985. And my experience of being a Jew in America, literally always, was an experience of comfort. And over the last decade or so, it's just gotten more and more uncomfortable. Whether we argue, has it gotten more or less dangerous, that's not actually what I want to talk about. I want to talk about comfort. And it is incredibly uncomfortable today to be a Jew in America. When Avraham describes himself as ger v'toshav, Soloveitchik explains he was a resident in the sense that, like other inhabitants of Canaan, he shared with them a concern for the welfare of the society. He dug wells, he contributed to the progress of the country, and he was loyal to its governments and institutions. Now, Soloveitchik, I think, is a little bit of an anachronism. I think it was more tribally organized at the time. Government and institutions feels like a little bit of a stretch, but he's obviously connecting to his experience of the Jewish people in America. Here, Avraham was clearly a fellow citizen, a patriot among compatriots, joining others in advancing the common welfare. However, there's another aspect. He's also a ger. And that aspect, Soloveitchik describes, was in the realm of the spiritual, in which Abraham regarded himself as a stranger. His identification, his solidarity with his fellow citizens in the secular realm did not imply his readiness to relinquish any aspect of his religious uniqueness. His was a different faith, and he was governed by perceptions, truths, and observances, which set him apart from the larger faith community. In this regard, Abraham and his descendants would always remain strangers. What is Soloveitchik describing? He's saying the Jew, by mere virtue of being particular and having in his description a certain set of religious practices that are going to make them unique, the Jew will always be a stranger. And in that way, the thing that he describes is that the Jewish people, whenever they live in a predominantly non-Jewish society, which is us in America, will always be both at home and fundamentally uncomfortable. And I grew up Reform, and my religion was not getting in the way of me belonging in America when I was growing up. In fact, Reform Judaism was formed in order to not get in the way and to make sure that we could be full citizens, full inhabitants of wherever we lived. And in a sense, we could drop that feeling of being a ger. Soloveitchik was modern Orthodox. He was speaking from the perspective of having many rules and boundaries that reminded him every single day that he was a stranger. And I was thinking about this Torah this week. I had the opportunity to learn with Dr. Ilana Stein-Hain, who is the Rosh Beit Midrash of the Shalom Hartman Institute. And she's an incredible teacher. She does a podcast. It's called Texting, IRL, Texting in Real Life, where she studies Torah text and does that in Chevruta, in pair, over a podcast. And it's a great podcast if you want to be learning and thinking. So Ilana Stein-Hain brought up something that I think really articulated this tension. So I was very careful and specific to read Soloveitchik in his own terms, where he says that this is a religious conflict that we feel. And yet, I think you all should know where I'm leading, which is that the conflict that we feel today is over Zionism. That's the part of Jewishness that we're being asked to renounce. It's not our religious commitments. It's Zionism. And what Dr. Ilana Stein-Hain was teaching was about the cross-pressure that a Zionist Jew would feel in America today. So I want to start here by just naming the three categories that she discusses. She says that the cross-pressures that you would feel today are that, first of all, in the American discourse right now, when we're talking about Israel, we're really not talking about Israel. Because of the way anti-Semitism functions, and you guys, this stuff I'm talking about is so complex, and I'm actually trying to be brief. So if you don't like how I say it, come and talk to me and we'll go deeper together. But basically, the way anti-Semitism functions means that Israel, as a proxy for the Jewish people, gets labeled and slandered with all of the ills of Western society. That's a dynamic that we're dealing with. And it's part of the way that Israel is present in the discourse, well beyond Israel, the actual place and its actions. Number two, we have been kicked out of coalitions. That's peer pressure. That's a way of shaming us in order to try to make us uncomfortable enough that we either change our politics or no longer feel belonging. And that actually, that number two, is something that in my position, I hear a lot of people having that experience and feeling very homeless in America right now. Like you don't know where you belong. And the reason that you don't know where you belong is because for most American Jews, we're being asked to split ourselves and our values in half in order to belong. And so, of course, you feel a lack of belonging and an uncertainty about where we are. Now, the last one of these cross pressures is that we are, and she was saying in particular, she wanted to talk about college campuses, that we're being labeled as bad Jews unless we renounce Israel. This is a very real dynamic. It's happened to me a few times. Just happened this week that I put up on my Facebook page the Israel trip informational meeting, and I got like 3 angry posts on the page from a Jewish person who was saying, "How dare you, genocide, liberal rabbis, you suck, da 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 da." And I was like, oh, I knew that was coming, so I actually took it off and I private messaged the person. I said, "I'm deleting your post," because it was only in the language of shame. It was just there to pressure me to feel bad. It wasn't about dialoguing. They weren't asking, what's the content of the Israel trip and how are you going to deal with the complexity of Israel? It was just Israel, trigger, bad, renounce. That's where we're operating. So within that frame, I said, I'd love to talk, I'd love to connect, and I'm taking this screed off of my Facebook page. Thank you. So, the third piece of being bad Jews unless we renounce, I want to take a moment here. I believe Zionism and Judaism are 2 separate things. Zionism is deeply important to the majority of Jews in the world today, not to mention all of the inhabitants who live in Israel and have a self-interested stake in their state being able to defend itself. That is clear. American Jews, we have a lot of complexity to work through vis-a-vis our own understanding of what it means to us to be Jews, and also what it means to us to be Jews who are connected to a place where we do not vote, where we do not have political agency. I want to differentiate between Judaism and Zionism because I want to actually return to what Soloveitchik said. He promises that the Jewish experience is going to be one of discomfort, where there are parts of us that belong and parts of us that don't belong. What are we to do in this moment? In a moment where, on the one hand, anti-Zionism is becoming a normal part of American politics. And on the other hand, some really scary anti-Semitic politics are on the rise as well. We're living in unprecedented times. And if American Jews don't feel squeezed right now to pick a side, I don't know what news you're listening to. We're being asked to pick one or other part of ourselves, and yet the Torah says we will be Gerim and Toshavim. I want to share one last teaching that Ilana Steinhain brought, and that was in relation to what it means to be in coalition. So this was a teaching from Bernice Johnson Reagan, and it was talking about coalition politics turning the century. It was written in 1998. So what Reagan describes is the dynamic of being in a coalition versus being at home. She says, coalition work is not done in your home. Coalition work has to be done in the streets, and it is some of the most dangerous work you can do. You shouldn't look for comfort. Some people will come to coalition and they'll rate the success of the coalition on whether or not they felt good when they got there. They're not looking for a coalition, they're looking for a home. What is our job as Jewish people right now? It is actually to build a home. We get to build the home where we belong. We get to co-create a home where all of our complexity and nuance is not checked at the door. And simultaneously, we go out into the world and we represent that home that we believe in and that we've built. And when we encounter people who don't agree with us, I believe we cannot censor them, we cannot cancel them. We engage with them from the place of what we believe to be true. The tool of saying that you are a bad Jew if you don't renounce Zionism, we cannot use that same metric internally to our own people. If our young Jews are trying to renounce Israel to to try to belong? What is the tool that we will use to bring them into our home? We need to keep each other together based on what we believe positively. They are struggling with complexity. We might have failed to educate them, but I don't believe we can use the same metric of labeling them as bad Jews, because that metric is being done to us from the outside. This is complex. You might not like it. I'm open to thinking more about it, but I want to share it because the words of our Torah say we are going to be uncomfortable. And the most sacred thing to me is that our discomfort comes from a place of building together what we believe to be true. And if a next generation doesn't get the chance to think with us, we lose. However, you do not have to bend what you believe in order to be in dialogue. That is the deepest and hardest thing to know. Instead of cutting each other off, we have to go deeper into what we believe. We have to fight for what we believe. We have to represent what we believe. And that's the thing I hope you'll take away from this teaching this morning. I took a lot of time. I might have made some people upset, but I love you all dearly. And as I said at the beginning, I'm grateful that all of us are here together today. And I really welcome any and all of you to come and speak to me. I'll make time for each of you because I care about you. Shabbat Shalom.